Hi there. I am making some tea this morning. It's early in the morning and it's a cold, rainy spring morning in the Pacific Northwest on the Oregon coast. So instead of being out in my garden, I thought that I would still play with my herbs, but in a whole different way. So today I'm making mostly tea. I'm also going to be straining some medicines that I made a few weeks ago that have been um, marinating. And then I'm going to make one salve as well. So a little medicine making, a little joy making, and I thought I'd just sort of walk you through the process a little bit. I'm going to go step by step with every tea, but I'm going to turn the camera around and kind of show you what my spread looks like and what I'm planning on doing today. Okay, so here is the spread. I have, well, let's start over here actually. If you haven't seen my very cool apothecary pull-out pantry that my husband just made me a few weeks ago, this is it. And these are jars of herbs from our garden mostly, and also some tinctures. You could say a couple of different tinctures that I've made. And on this side I have the labels because I really just love looking at the jars of herbs. And you can tell that it's the middle of May because most of those jars are looking pretty empty. You know, so especially like, oh my gosh, I almost have no holy basil left. And some of the herbs come from mountain rose herbs, like these are not herbs that I grow. And I'm just very blessed that mountain rose herbs is out of Eugene, Oregon, which is really close to me, and my local food co-op in Newport carries their product in bulk, so that makes me super happy. And let's see, I don't know if I can show you this in action, but it's super fun. It just slides right up against my refrigerator, and then you barely just see a little bit, which I love the little peekaboo peek of my herbs because it just makes me so happy. And then I have my list of all the different medicines and tea blends that I'm going to be making today. This is my pantry door. Both of my pantry doors have been painted with chalk paint so I can use them. These are herbs that I will be purchasing soon, hopefully from the Thyme Garden up the Alsea River, which is maybe an hour away from where I live. And so let's see, and then these are the medicines that I have already made, and they've been sitting in the sunny window and getting shaken pretty much every day. Sometimes I forget, but mostly it's been every day. So I have fire cider and 4 thieves vinegar and a brain tonic, which helps with memory and focus. And you can tell we're in a pandemic, so things like fire cider and 4 thieves is just helping with our immune systems. And if we feel like we're getting sick, we can immediately start taking some of these things. I'm also making another batch of elderberry syrup, which is a syrup that my husband and I take quite often, maybe not daily, but close to it. And it's an immune booster, and then you can take extra if you're actually getting sick. So starting back over on this side of the counter, I just did want to make a mention of the Oceana Natural Food Cooperative in Newport, which is my local food co-op where I buy a lot of bulk herbs that I don't grow myself. And then these are the labels that I use. I just buy them at the Dollar Tree, really easy access for me. And then I just use a fine point Sharpie to write down what's in the jar, the name of the blend that's in the jar, and then what exactly is inside of it. Especially if I have friends that are going to be partaking in any of the tea blends, I want to make sure that they can take every item that's in the blend. course, I have my coffee because it's early in the morning and I need coffee. These are some of the recipes that I'm not super familiar with, so I just have a little reference guide here. Most of these tea blends that I make are from various recipes from Rosemary Gladstar or Marjorie Wildcraft on the Grow Network. I have my digital scale here to help me determine how much herb per blend I use. This is a local honey and elderberries for my elderberry syrup. We will not be using the wine today, but this is just where I keep it on my counter. I'm going to be making some banana nut muffins later on this weekend, so they're just sitting there to remind me. So I reuse my jars, and I mostly have tomato jars, different tomato products, salsas and sauces and marinades and the like, because I just haven't gotten into canning tomatoes. It's a little bit scary, but I just joined a program, Pioneer Academy, with Melissa K. Norris, and she is going to be walking me through canning tomatoes this summer, which I am so excited about, as well as many other vegetables. So I have all my different types of herbs. Some of them I got fresh out of the garden. These are mullein leaves. I like to use them pretty fresh because when you crush them up, you could actually see the silica that's inside of them, which is helping with soothing throats when you have a dry cough. And this is a headache tea blend that I recently made, and I just wanted to include it because I wanted to show that, you know, basically what an end result tea blend would look like. And then I just have some other dried herbs that I picked up from the food co-op. And then this is what I'll be using to make the garden salve, I call it garden salve. It's for my hands. I'm going to try to make a salve that's pretty heavy on the beeswax, because gloves in the garden just don't work for me. And I don't know, stickers always find my tender spots on my hands, and so I always have these little tiny slivers that I'm fighting with. So I'm hoping I can find a salve blend that I can use to protect my hands while I'm gardening. Not afterwards. I have salves that I use afterwards to keep my hands, you know, healed and smooth, and you know, playing in the water and the dirt all the time from gardening can be really rough on your hands. So I, you know, use a salve for that, but I'm trying to find a salve that I can make that will protect my hands while I'm gardening. So then I just have some measurements and some empty jars in case I need them, and I think that is kind of it. So I'll just touch bases with you as I'm making different blends and talk to you a little bit about them as I go along. If you're not familiar with how to measure herbs, you can go by measuring cups, which I did for years, but a much more accurate way to measure your herbs, when recipes call for 1 part something to 2 parts something, it's a lot easier to know exactly what you're doing, especially when you're making medicinal teas. Now, when I'm making just like fun blends that I really enjoy, I don't worry about the specifics quite as much. But this first recipe that I'm making is for a chronic cough that a family member of mine has, and I want to make sure that I'm very precise with it because it is going to be medicine. So the first thing you do is, first thing that you want to do, let's turn this off. Okay, is you're going to put a clear bowl, or you're going to put a bowl here, and then you're going to tare so that that becomes 0, even though we know the weight of the bowl is more than 0 grams. I'm on ounces, so I can change this to pounds or grams. And I'm just familiar with ounces, so I like to use ounces. You could use grams for dried herbs, that's fine. But you just want to make sure that this is at 0. And then you can put in your herb. And this tells me that there's 7 grams of this particular herb, which is passion flower. And so I could put that in another bowl that I'll be making the blend in. And then I can add, and then put my bowl back on so that I'm back at, oh, look, it says 0. So that it says 0. And then it's 1 part to 1 part. So this is marshmallow root. And I'll pour that in until that is at a 7. And then that tells me it's the same amount of herb. Because some herbs are just going to be heavier than others. And you just want to make sure that you can see here, for example, that there is a lot more passion flower herb than to the marshmallow root, even though they're the exact same weight. Another thing that you can do if you need to dry just a small amount of herbs in a short amount of time is spread them out on a cookie sheet and put them in the oven for 200 degrees. And then you can just get them dry enough to the point where they crumble in your hands. And that way you can store them without them getting moldy or anything like that. Here's what I like to call my achy break tea. It helps with inflammation and achy joints. And I always laugh when I make it because it looks like something I would feed the rabbits. So I just wanted to share, I just use a kitchen fork to mix my dry herbs instead of my fingers or anything like that. It just helps give it a gentle toss around, and I just love these oat tops. They're so sweet. I just like, I don't know, I just love them. I love having whole like pieces of herbs so you can really see what they look like. Some people like to blend their herbs into really small pieces, and that's fine too. I just prefer to see exactly what I'm drinking. And then again, I just label it. I actually just go ahead and put the whole recipe right there so I know exactly what it is, and I can make it again easily the next time. And then I always date it. So that is that. It's nettles and oat tops and horsetail, and then you can add stevia or honey to taste, because it really does just kind of taste like rabbit food. The nettles really help with, it's an anti-inflammatory basically, and the horsetail helps with building calcium. This is also, all 3 of these ingredients are super high in calcium, which is really great for women especially, but it also really helps with joint pain. Okay, so I'm done with all of my tea blends and medicine making for today, and I'm just going to show you what the end result looks like. This really wasn't supposed to be a how-to video, but more about encouraging you to make your own tea blends and your own medicine. If you're a gardener and you grow vegetables and herbs, then you have medicine on site that you can be making for you and your family, and possibly for your neighbors. I'm talking about really simple medicine making and tea blends. Not anything that could get you in any kind of trouble. It's just about understanding some of the symptoms and signs that your family and friends have that maybe you can help relieve until they can see a medical professional. And I'm just talking about things like everyday common ailments like headaches, acne, coughs, definitely, cold and flu type medicines. You're just going to go to a doctor and they're going to maybe give you antibiotics, but mostly they're just going to say rest, lots of fluids, you know, and they might give you a cough suppressant, which I'm not a big fan of, because I believe that your body is trying to expel whatever is inside, and that is why you're coughing or, you know, vomiting, and you have a lot of phlegm that needs to come up and out. I'm a big fan of using of ways to get that out of your system, and herbs can absolutely help you with relieving some of those symptoms. So this isn't, I am not giving any kind of advice on what herbs are needed for what things and how they work in your body. There are amazing, amazing herbalists out there that you can follow. I highly recommend Sanjay Papan. Definitely, if you're a beginner, check out Rosemary Gladstar. She is the founder of today's herbal medicine backyard grower. I mean, her and her family and colleagues have done a tremendous job in spreading the good news of backyard herbal medicine. And there's many others, and I can recommend those to you if you don't feel like, I mean, those two are definitely on opposite ends of the spectrum. Sajay he's into astro herbalism, which is just absolutely mind-blowing and very deep, and he gives tons and tons of information. And if you're in the beginning stages of making medicine and understanding herbs and growing your own herbs, it may be a little bit over your head and you feel like you're drowning, but he's still really awesome to listen to aspire towards. And then Rosemary Gladstar at times can seem very, very simple, but her recipes and way of life is very straightforward and very effective. So that's why I always recommend those two people, but there are many, many, many others in between. Definitely Dr. Patrick Jones. He's in Colorado and he is amazing. He's got the most fantastic sense of humor, and he explains things that are just like, they make the light bulbs go on, so you really understand exactly what you're doing and what your end result, what you should be looking for in your end result. This video, from my perspective, is mostly just about encouraging you to take care of yourself and take care of the people that you love, and to do it in a way that is simple, satisfying, and filled with joy. And for me, if you haven't already watched my video on making 30 meals and at once, maybe it's 60 meals at once, I'm not sure. Go back and watch that video because it's highly popular, and it really gives a lot of in-depth of how I do batch. Well, I do everything in batches. So I make medicine in batches, I make teas in batches, I make all my food in batches, I make, what else do and I do canning in batches. So I probably do other things in mini batches because that's just how I work. I'm most effective doing everything at once. I'm not a big routine kind of person as far as having to do the same thing over and over and over again. And when I do have to do that, I want to do those things in super micro sessions, so like cleaning and that kind of thing, which I also have a video on. I think it's called Simply Sparkle. So with that being said, I'm just going to show you what the end looks like. You saw my apothecary herbal medicine pull out earlier in the video, and I will show you how it's now full of filled jars. So here it is, partially pulled out, and you can see that it is now full of jars. And I have made multiple medicines and tea blends. These are the tea blends that I've made, to almost all of them today. Let me see if I can pull this out safely with the video. Probably not. It's really heavy now that all the jars are in there. So pull it out a little bit more so you can see. So I made a joint an achy joint relief tea. This is my favorite tea. I drink this every single night. It's got dandelion root, turmeric root, ginger root, and a little bit of black pepper. And I absolutely love this blend. If you're interested in any of these blends, just let me know and I can put the recipe in the comments below. I also made a digestive aid and what I like to call chillax. It's basically mint, lavender, and rosemary. It just gives you that nice relaxing effect. This is my Rosa Mystica. It's rose and hibiscus, and I like to drink that when I'm cycling. And then I made my sister's Cough Be Gone tea blend. And then I just put all the remaining herbs and in their different jars. And then let's see. Oh, and then I strained out my other tonics. So I have a brain tonic, which is for memory loss and focus, and then fire cider, which is really ideal when you feel like you're getting sick or you're already sick. I have these comfrey waters. It's just a basically just comfrey soaked in water for a few days, and it's really good for healing. I use it on my dogs actually more than anything when they get like a little hot spot. It helps heal that really quickly. And then I also finished my elderberry. Well, I guess it goes down here. So it didn't quite fill this cute little jar, but that's fine. And I had just a little bit left over from my last batch, which is basically a dose for my husband to take when he wakes up. And then while I was waiting for the elderberry to cook down, I went ahead and started some bread rising, and it'll be ready to be cooked later in the morning. And I'm still waiting for my hand salve to cook down. The pellets that you're seeing there that have not melted yet are beeswax. And so I'm just waiting for the beeswax to melt down, and then I can add the essential oils and put it in a jar for it to cool. So I think that's kind of all I'm gonna do in this video. I just really want to encourage you that if you're I know I was really kind of scared of making medicine for myself and my family for a long time, and I just started with really simple teas, just peppermint tea that I grew from my garden. It's not really any kind of a tea, it's just the herb peppermint dried and steeped like you would for tea. And I grew it in my garden, and then I was able to drink it as a tea. And peppermint is a really great tummy ache relief remedy. So really super simple that you can get started with, that feels good, and you're not worried about blends and how much and or any of that kind of thing. So I just really encourage you that if you're growing your own herbs, to start making your own medicine. One more thing that I wanted to mention before I end this video is I hope that you just start right where you are. Don't wait until everything is perfect. If you're not growing your own herbs, go find a place that has bulk herbs and make your own tea blends through that way. Or if you're not ready to make tea and you just want to grow herbs and learn how, have that whole experience, then just grow herbs, and you don't have to dry them and make tea out of them yet. Just start somewhere, whatever makes you feel the most joyful, and it'll just be a natural progression to do the next thing. I know a lot of people who started making their own medicine because they felt like they needed to do that for their family, and then they realized how much better it might be if they grew the herbs themselves. And then on the other hand, I know a lot of people that grew herbs because they're really beautiful and they fill in landscapes pretty quickly. Most Mediterranean herbs grow fast and they fill in spaces really nicely, and a lot of them flower and they have great textures and colors. And so I know a lot of people that just started with growing herbs because they're a great plant to grow, and they're easy to grow. Most herbs are pretty easy to grow. They're really satisfying for beginner growers because you can't mess them up too badly. And then they're like, wait a minute, I have so much herb. What do I do with this? I feel guilty just tossing it away or putting it in the compost, which is perfectly fine for, you know, if that's what brings you joy. But a lot of people progress into, this is, you know, food and I can do something with this, and they start drying it and making their own teas and using them as herbs, you know, just kitchen herbs to cook with and all that kind of thing. So I encourage you to start right where you are, wherever that might be, and don't wait for perfection. The other thing I wanted to mention, and you probably noticed this in my videos, is that I don't bother with taking off all the labels perfectly because of the used jars that I use. When I gift jars to people, I do clean them up and make them, you know, really nice and presentable and have fancy labels made and put them, you know, in little gift baskets and all that kind of thing. But for home use, I'm not going to spend hours and hours and hours peeling labels. It is not something I enjoy, and it doesn't really matter. So long as the inside of my jar is clean, I boil my jars, they're totally clean, the lids are totally clean, and they're going to protect the herbs from breaking down and getting moisture or bugs or anything else in them. That is the most important part. And then, of course, putting a label of some kind to let me know what's inside the jar, even if it's just slapped on over the old label, that's good enough for me. And it didn't used to be. 2 years ago, I wouldn't have made all those tea blends because I didn't have the perfect jars and all the lids didn't match. A year ago, I wouldn't have shared that video with you because I would have a lot of judgment about myself having imperfect jars. But what I've come to realize is that making medicine is so much more important, and I would hate for something to happen where I knew a recipe and I could have had those herbs ready to go under a certain circumstance. You know, somebody cut their finger, or, you know, they got sick with the flu, or something came up really fast, and I didn't have that remedy on hand because the jars weren't perfect. That is not a very good excuse to me to not have medicine on hand. So if you start using, you know, this is a jelly jar and it's been used many times, and as you can see, there's still like some sticky residue from the glue of the original label, and the more I wash it, the more it comes off, and I just keep messing with it until it's, you know, a totally clear jar, and that's fine with me. These are jars that I would never, ever, ever use for canning, ever. They're not safe for canning. But storing dried herbs is perfectly fine. This is a jar that's a little bit more recent, and a lot of the label is still on there. Even though these jars have been boiled, and I've scraped them and scraped them, but I'm not going to spend hours and hours peeling labels. And I've used all kinds of different methods. I've used Goof Off, which gives me headaches, and it's who knows what it's made out of. I don't really want it on my jars, and it just leaves a smeary, gross mess anyway, so I'm not impressed with Goof Off for label removal. And like I said, boiling it didn't, that's not 100% guarantee that they're going to come off. And the most effective way that I have found is keeping the outside of the jar totally dry, getting super hot water inside, so using a tea kettle or just really hot water from the tap, and letting it sit there for just a few minutes, and then it loosens the adhesive and you're able to pull the label off. But it's not 100% guarantee, and it always leaves bits and pieces anyway. So I'm just letting you know that using used jars that have the label still on them, it doesn't matter. Just make your medicine and find pleasure and joy in that. If you have pleasure and joy in scraping labels for hours at a time, be my guest. It's just not something that brings me joy, and I just wanted to make sure that you knew that it's okay to let go of that perfection and just start doing the things that you love right now.